Hey there, Don fans. Welcome to Don the Stats' first thoughts of season 2026. I'm Ian Hume, and I'm joined by my co-host Jonathan Walsh to talk about Essendon's performance in their practice game out the hangar against the Tigers today. Jono, great to have you here tonight. You managed to get out to the hangar. How did you enjoy the experience?
Yeah, good. Thank you, mate. It was a nice way to spend the morning out in the sunshine at the hangar with a pretty big turnout. I was really surprised by the number of people there, particularly on a Friday morning. There was plenty of Bomber fans and Richmond fans out there. So, yeah, it was great. I think people are certainly excited to have footy back. And I was actually speaking to my dad on the way home and we sort of recounted the years gone by where, we'd play practice games in Fairbout at places like Skinner Reserve and these kind of places, and there'd be 3 or 4 people there who were usually just parents of a young bloke who was playing his first scratch game. Now you're getting, I don't know, I'm terrible with crowds, but there must have been 2,500 people there on a Friday morning. It's, pretty incredible. Yeah, nice to see the boys put in a pretty good performance as well.
Yeah, indeed. And I was quite jealous of you being able to get out there. The rest of us plebs had to scrounge away at work, and I've managed to catch up on the replay, although the quality of the camera work leaves a lot to be desired. So I'm going to defer to you being there on your takes with regards to the game. For those new to Don the Stat, we put these first thoughts out post every game. This is more about our immediate thoughts and the sort of more planned and considered approach we take to reviewing games in the regular show. Normally, these are Patreon exclusive, but for the preseason games, we release them to the public. So if you do enjoy what you hear in these First Thoughts episodes, please do check out the Patreon. Our First Thoughts episodes are also where we do our Jack Kirby Medal votes, which is the Don the Stat Best and Fairest Award. And we love to get the Patreon participation into that as well. Right, let's get into it, Jono. As is tradition, we'll start with the negatives before moving on to the positives from this practice clash. Take it away, mate.
Yeah, so for those that haven't listened to this segment before, the method is, 3 or 4 negatives from the game. Try and focus on game style aspects or setup or tactics rather than individual players, and then 3 or 4 positives from the game as well. So simple format. But yeah, it really just helps us consolidate our thoughts. So look, I think it's hard to, sort of conscious that it's only February and we shouldn't go too hard on the bad and we shouldn't talk up the good too much either. I thought there was a bit too much picking and choosing from our forwards when it came to defensive actions today. And from the start, really, like even in the first quarter, guys weren't really chasing with a whole lot of vigour. We're sort of jogging to get across and cover, exit lanes. And there was a real, at times, lack of pressure or lack of effort to apply pressure. So I think for us to become a really, really good team, that's got to be something that we need to be doing all the time. It's not a some of the time thing. And for me today, it still felt too much like a some of the time thing.
Yeah, I guess, it's hard to take too many negatives out of a practice game that you don't know how much either team was putting into it. You mentioned that it's a hot day, so there's probably an element of reserving themselves from really extenuating themselves, particularly towards the back end of the match as you sort of watch the match sort of play out for the last quarter and a half. It did sort of descend into circle work and into, not a huge amount of effort there. There obviously was times when it was quite hot or relatively hot for a practice match. But again, you can't take a whole lot out of it. I mean, we were sitting here this time last year beating the Bulldogs and then Geelong in practice games, and we didn't get close to those teams when the real stuff came around. We played them 4 times and couldn't even get close. So it's a real grain of salt areas, these practice game results. I think the main one that stood out to me was, other than ball use, which did get better as the day went on, so I'm going to put that down to rust, was once again we had a team jump us. Too many times last year we were slow out of the blocks in the first quarter and teams were able to get a decent lead on us. It obviously didn't matter today, but you can't keep playing games from that far behind. You burn too many petrol tickets trying to catch up. And that really adds up over the course of the season. You do need to get some of those easy teams that finish in the finals, get some of those easy kills. They put a team to the sword in the first quarter and a half and are able to coast from there for the most part, particularly against the lower sides. You're constantly having to fight and scrap your way through the entirety of matches. It's really hard to go deep into a season.
Yeah, fair point. I think it was actually ball use was the reason why they were able to jump us. And in the first quarter, our turnovers were in, parts of the ground where you're then forced to defend the whole ground, and that makes it difficult. Whereas as the game went on, we were able to our mids got on top, which helped. So we were able to get sort of deeper entries and better field position. And then when we were turning the ball over or winning it back off Richmond, we were doing that further up the ground. And then if we turned it over ourselves, we had less of the ground to defend. So I think you're right. Letting a team jump us again was a negative, but I think the reason for that was predominantly down to how we used the ball. And maybe that's a little bit of a connection thing, but on that, my sort of second negative of the day was the forwards again. Just there's still this habit, and it's going to take time, and I'm probably asking for a bit too much that was going to be fixed today, but of not leading at the kicker, and particularly when they're up the ground, there's our forwards, particularly our bigger forwards, too often want the ball over the back, and then they're asking the kicker to have to run and carry the ball further and putting themselves under pressure rather than just being consistent, being predictable to the kicker and leading in straight lines at them. Wasn't so bad when they were deep, the forwards, but when they were up the ground, it was a real challenge. And then just a few instances where two of them, again, more so up the ground than back, were competing at the same ball, which meant we were creating a 2-on-2 rather than isolating some bigger forwards against some smaller Richmond defenders.
Yeah, it is one of those things that is constantly plagued us. Even just watching training during the pre-season, it was noticeable how often they were looking for that ball over the back. And again, I think we see with some of the best sides that they're a lot more comfortable holding back and holding back until they can time their lead, and they're not constantly running, pushing up the ground and then trying to push back. And again, it's one of those things that can create a little bit of fatigue in teams and ultimately result in them struggling towards the back end of games. I guess the big negative for the other day is not really from the game itself, but this is breaking news that Jordan Ridley has injured his calf, and it seemed like they were really building him up nicely over the preseason with the idea of him playing right at the beginning of the year. To have another setback like this is both difficult to swallow for the club and for Jordan themselves. I guess the positive is that both Reid and Mackay looked quite good today. And you've probably got some mid-size options, Redmonds, to come back. We saw some good signs from players like Newen and even like a Zach Johnson, not so much defensively, but as a ball movement. There's options back there. Jacob Farrow as well, who I think we'll touch on when we get to the positives. But again, it's disappointing they've spent so much time sort of building him back up, only for him to have another setback like this.
Yeah, it's sort of 3 years in a row now where he's had a soft tissue injury when he's returned to play games. Look, flattering news for Jordan. I think we'll talk during the week, no doubt, Humie, about what that means for round one. And I think we've got our Patreon Q&A this week, and it's probably timely after this game to review the heated conversation we had with Shorey around what our round one team looks like. But I know in my case I had Jordan out anyway. You had him in, so it has huge ramifications for Jordan. Obviously, he's a class player, and we want him back. And it must be really difficult for him mentally to put in the work of a full pre-season and then at first sight get injured again. So, feel for him. And then it obviously has ramifications for round one and what that back six looks like.
Yeah, indeed. Look, let's move on to the positives. And I think watching that first quarter, even when we were struggling with the ball movement and the like, we were pretty good at denying the Tigers the corridor when they were moving from their back half. And it felt like across the day, pretty much the only time that Richmond was able to take the corridor was when we turned the ball over inside there. So when they had the ball outside, they found it very difficult to go inside. And again, you're trying to deny the opposition a direct path to goal. So we were able to do that, I thought, fairly well, other than from our own mistakes with ball in hand for the entire of the day. Again, it's only a practice match. It's only against a team that's likely to be in the bottom four, but there were some encouraging signs there. And then on the flip side, obviously, we were constantly looking for the corridor, and I think we found it more often than not when we were looking for it. There was quite a lot of examples of overlap run there that really broke apart what the Tigers were trying to do in that second quarter in particular. Some nice signs, but again, grain of salt with the position that we were facing there.
Yeah, I mean, that corridor use or fast ball triggers was really the story of the day for me. We've now got some guys that are prepared to do that. And then I think, a great example early in the second quarter for anyone who wants to go back and watch the replay. It started with a Zach Johnson kick inside to Roberts, and then Johnson followed up as well and got it back again, and it ended up going forward, and Fiorini kicked a point. Really good example of using that corridor and Johnson using his skill set to unlock things. We saw, Farrow be able to do it a number of times as well, whether it was through the corridor or just open up things in space on a wing. And then the other thing that unlocked that corridor for us too was the sheer run and work rate that Archie Roberts now provides in the midfield, matched up with or paired up with Darcy Parish. The two of them able to get on the spread adds a real new dynamic. But yeah, I think that the next single biggest positive for me is just those three new guys and what they bring to the team. Sharp's hands, so both as an ability to pick the ball up below his knees cleanly, and then to use his handballing skills to distribute and put the ball out to people. There was a number of examples in the game where he was able to do that were incredible. A couple early in the first quarter, he set up the Duursma goal in the first minute of the third quarter. There was another one sort of a few minutes later where he won the ball and got it forward. Unfortunately, it was one of those examples where Caddy sort of started a lead and then propped and stopped and turned. But yeah, he's got something that we've lacked. Farrow's foot skills. I mean, we saw the impact that Johnson could have when he came into the side last year with his foot skills. The difference that Farrow has is he's got penetration on his kicks too that Johnson doesn't have. His ability to get the ball 50 or 60 metres up the ground is a real weapon. And then Hussein Al-Aksha's ability to win ground balls and get crumbs is, yeah, I mean, how long have we been waiting? Have we had one of them since Darren Buick? I'm not sure. Walla, I guess. But yeah, three young guys in their first sort of senior hit out, albeit a practice match, delivering something to the team that we haven't had on our list in a long, long time. So yeah, that was exciting.
Yeah, indeed. And I think another important thing is we spoke with Rick last night actually about some of the positional changes we noticed through the pre-season and whether they would actually play out in game. And I think for the two big ones that we focused on in terms of Duursma and Roberts, we saw it actually play out in that practice game. So it's not just trying out something for the preseason. It does seem to be a move that the team is wanting to make. I guess in Roberts' case, there was no merit, there was no Kako. So potentially Roberts could push back in the rotation there. But I think we saw with Roberts in the midfield, either as a qualified tick, ball use wasn't always the best. And I think it's something he's had issues with all through his short career. His ability in the contest was fantastic. His ability to find space and evasion was really good and just, adds more midfield depth and options there, particularly as a left footer. Just adds something different in that space there. So definitely something that I see them really investing in across the season, whether it's, just a few times a game, just to sort of build him up and try and keep everyone fresh. But I think that there is definitely something there.
Yeah, definitely. I think Arch AFL ratings.com.au put out centre bounce attendances, and of the midfielders, Caldwell and Roberts were equal on 73%, Parish 70%, and then it sort of, down to Durham 36%, Gresham 23%, Sharp 20%, Fiorini, I think, went in for 1 towards the end. So your comment on Merritt's a sound one. He wasn't there, but based on the fact that we sort of went heavy minutes on just the three mids, I think there's still space for Merritt to come into that rotation with Roberts as well in that mix, and room for Sharp to take a little bit more. And then I guess, Kako probably takes a spot of someone like Guelphy today, if you think about the sort of the starting 18 or the preferred 23. I think there's space for him to come too. But yeah, I think the Duursma move worked really, really well. It was interesting. I thought he might be the high half forward that then goes up on around the ball, but he actually didn't. That was Sharp more often than not. And then, I did notice Duursma at times still pushing up into the defensive 50 and then tracking the ball back forward. And like we sort of mentioned the other night with Rick, the thing that he does, unlike, say, someone like Ben Hobbs, is he commands a defender to go with him. So it had a dual impact in that, Durs was dangerous and was able to get shots on goal, but it also created space behind him for others to work into because his defender wasn't dropping off as often as we saw happen to us last year. So yeah, I like that. And then I guess the other positional change was that of Clark, who basically mirrored Duursma's role, didn't he? Rotating between half forward and wing, and then spent a little bit of time back later in the game once some positional changes or guys were rotated off the ground happened. So yeah, I think he looked comfortable in that position as well and showed that he makes good decisions going forward. like Duursma, he's good overhead, can also win the ball on ground and typically makes good decisions by foot as well. So, yeah, pulled some strings over the off-season into today's game, and so far they look like working. And then Fiorini on the other wing, I think, just gives us a safe set of hands. I commented to someone today that, I don't think he'll play too many 10 out of 10 games, but I don't think he'll play many, 3 out of 10 games. I think, we'll get 17 or 18 games this season where he's a 7 or an 8 out of 10. He's just going to be a really consistent, solid performer for us on the wing.
Yeah, and that's sort of what you need in teams. You need those players across all the lines so that they're just going to be consistent each week. You know what you're going to get, so you can sort of build around that. I guess just my final one. You spoke a lot about one of your interview subjects from the other week in Duursma. Well, the other player you interviewed in Darcy Parish looked right back to his best, as well. His ability to get across the ground and really push forward as well was really exciting. So, you have to touch a lot of wood when we're talking about Darcy Parish, given everything that's happened over the past couple of years. But, if what we've seen today is what we're going to get across the season from Darcy Parish, I think it's going to go a long way to us having a successful year. He's so important, and it's something we haven't enjoyed for the last couple of years. Him at his best, and from what we've seen in this practice match, it does seem like he's nearing that, at least in the form that we've seen so far.
Yeah, covered the ground really, really well both ways. His kicking was good. It wasn't perfect. There was a couple on the left foot that he did shank, but the fact that he was using his left is a good sign for me. A really nice kick to Caddy late in quarter one, around the 25-minute mark, where he hit Nate, which was nice. There was just before that, I sort of time-stamped it in my notes. It was about 22 minutes into that first quarter. He had multiple defensive efforts to create a turnover. That was the one that people might remember. The ball ended up with Blackiston, who ran forward and kicked to Peter Wright, who had broken on his defender but kicked it over his head, and we weren't able to get a mark from it. But that goal opportunity came because of Darcy Parish's defensive work rate. Kicked a couple of goals himself, one from a forward stoppage, one just running forward from the midfield. Yeah, good day out by Darcy. Let's hope that's a strong building block into next week and then ultimately round one.
Yeah, indeed. Fingers crossed. Well, look, that will do us for these first thoughts of the practice match. There's no votes for practice matches, so that Kirby will start properly with our first clash against the Hawks in a couple of weeks. Thanks for your time tonight, Jono. We'll be back midweek with the Patreon Q&A, and then our first thoughts following our match practice against the Saints. Until then, stay safe, everyone, and go Dons.